Remember, you can type your questions into the student chat. And welcome today to Ariba Procurement Receiving. My name's Nancy Morin. If you've listened to me before, you've heard my voice many times. If you were also here this week, we covered a few other sections, and now we're up to receiving. Okay, so we'll talk about the receiving process and many of the options for receiving, because there are different options to do the goods receipt. So this week we've gone through the process. We started with the request, approval, order, fulfillment. So the supplier sent us the stuff. And then finally the receipt. Okay, so I just typed a direct note so you can see that. Okay, so now users go into the system and confirm they received the goods. So receiving in SAP Ariba is just an acknowledgement within the system that the goods have arrived. Okay. So once I have the stuff, I can go into the system and it can be done manually or automatically. Okay, so you can set the system up to automatically receive certain items, and certain items can be manually received. So you can do a combination, or of course you could do all are manually received, all are automatically received. The system also supports multiple receiving, supports partial receiving. So basically, if my order ships in 3 different shipments, I ordered, say, 60, and I get 20 in each shipment, I can receive each one as it arrives. So what will happen is once you've submitted your order, it goes into ordered status, and then it will move to receiving. Okay, so when the system expects that you should receive the goods, the item will go into receiving. If you partially receive some of the items, it'll go into receiving. And then finally, when you receive it all, it'll become received. In the system, we have different receiving types. Basically, it determines how receiving will be done. How will someone go in and manually enter the receipt? Someone goes in and says, I got the stuff. Will it be auto received? So based on my lead time, will something get received automatically? Usually used for low dollar items. We'll talk more about it as well. And then no receipt. So if you don't want any receipt, you do a 2-way match instead of a 3-way match. The invoice matches the PO or the contract. It also determines if you're going to receive by quantity or by amount. So do I put in the quantity of items received or the amount of items being received? Sorry, I seem to be stuck. Okay. It also determines, then you have the receipt approval rules who determine who does the receipt. So when we say desktop receiving, that means the requester. So whoever requested was the requester on the requisition, whoever requested the goods would perform the receiving in the system. Central receiving is when goods are received at a central location. Right? So if I receive my items into, say, a shipping department or warehouse, so somebody centrally receives it, and then it's a group where more than one user can receive the shipment. The default configuration, supports central receiving based on commodity code. So you put people in a specific group to receive, and that's based on, and they have a specific for the specific commodity code. The approval rules also allow for hybrid receiving methods and additional approvals. So if you have central receiving, for example, you could have it centrally received and then had the user do an approval once they get the box and open it. The default configuration is manual receipt by quantity. So I must go into the system, enter the receipt, tell how many, and put in the quantity that I received. The basic process is find the order, enter the receipt, and submit for approval. There are a couple different ways to find this. The receipt will show up in your to-do list once it's reached the point where it expects you to do the receipt. There's also a receive button on the PR or the PO. So you'll see that at the top of your purchase requisition or your PO. Under manage, there's also a receive menu where you can do the receipt there. And based on when the system expects the goods to arrive, you'll also get an email notification letting you know that you should do the receipt. The system also allows for over receiving and under receiving. So basically, you put in a tolerance that you'll allow a certain amount of over receiving. For example, the PO has a quantity of 100. I'm going to allow for a 10% tolerance so you could actually receive 110. Okay, so it allows you to receive over the amount created on the PO. Under receiving says that if that same $100 PO has a 10% under tolerance, when I receive 90, it'll automatically consider that purchase order fully received. Okay, but if it's under that tolerance, you could still do partial receiving. So like if I had 50, it wouldn't close it, but once it hits that tolerance, it would close it. So it's distinct by business entity, and tolerances are not inherited from one purchasing unit to another. So if you have a parent business unit or purchasing unit, it won't automatically go to the tolerances. They have to be specified by each PU. And this is the table, basically. And you decide, is it an over-receiving percentage, or is it an over-receiving quantity or value? And you can do under-receiving the same way, percentage, quantity, or value. This example obviously is 20% over and under. So let's go into the system and take a look at how it's done. Okay. So I do have receipts in my to-do box. Okay, most of these are from other people, but here's one that's mine, right? So if I have a receipt here, I could go in and find it in my to-do and hit receive. I can also just go into my documents and here's my purchase requisition. Here's my receive button. This is my order number. So this is my requisition number. This is my order number. So I could also get that order number. So besides when I'm in the order, so when I'm in the PO, I have the receive button. Excuse me. Let me go home. And I would also find it under Manage Receive, where I could enter my order number. I can also enter it by rec ID, receipt ID, or contract ID. Okay, so, but generally, most common way to look for it is you have the purchase order from the supplier. I click search, and it'll find this PO that needs receiving. I have 3 line items. Okay, I can receive all. I have an accept all button that will receive everything. So we'll go ahead and do that. It'll put it puts the quantity in the accepted amount. That's where I would put it. And then I would submit. So for this particular order, I received everything. I could select another request to receive, or I could just return home. I can also partial receive. So I have another order a little further down. So here I have this order, and let's receive from here. I can go to the receipts tab and I will see my receipt in composing, but I'll hit receive. And I'll say I got, say, 10 of these, 5 of these, right? I only do a partial receipt. I submit. Go back home because I want to go back to that same requisition. So when I go back to that requisition, let me scroll down so you can see it. So it's this one. The status will change to receiving. So here the status changed. It just takes a minute on the home page. And when I go to the receipts tab, I'll actually have 2 receipts because it closes the first one. So it keeps the history of what happened. Okay. If I go back one, and then it opens a new one that does tell me that I previously received against it. And now I could accept the additional amount. So if I hit edit, it'll open it up and I could put in additional quantities. So maybe I got 1 of these now and submit. And it'll continue to do that until the entire thing is received. So now let's talk about automatic receiving. Okay, so were there any questions? I should have asked that. See if anyone's typing. So we did a manual receipt. Now let's talk about auto receiving. Auto receiving can be based on the total order amount or the line item amount. So I could say, for example, that I'm going to auto receive any order that the total cost is under $200. Or I may say I will receive any line item that I will auto receive any line item that costs less than, say, $100. Right? So you usually do it on smaller amounts, but you can also do it by commodity or part number. So for example, you may say, I will auto receive any line item under $100 if the commodity code is for office supplies, because generally our office supply people are good with returns and so on, especially for small dollar amounts. Okay, the receiving can be done on ordered status. So immediately when the item becomes ordered, the receipt will be done. You could set it up to do it on the order due date. So if there's a lead time in the catalog item, it will do it then. You can do it on invoice reconciliation. So when the invoice is reconciled on the PO, it'll go and automatically receive and do the order receipt. And if you're doing it for P card orders, it would be on the charge reconciliation. Okay, so receipt notifications. So how do I know when I should do the receipt? There is an automatic function. You will get an email. It will put the receipt into the appropriate user's to-do list. So if I need to do the goods receipt, I will get an email letting me know. Okay. And then also I'll see it. But this email and the notification, putting it into everything, putting it into the to-do list, the notification, all that is based on the order due date. So for catalog items, it'll be based on the lead time specified in the catalog item. Okay, so the orders that I created in the last 2 days didn't go into my to-do necessarily with a goods receipt because it expected, say, a 7-day lead time. It expected me to receive it next week. So it'll be based on that lead time. Non-catalog items are immediate by default. So if I create a requisition with a non-catalog item, by default, when it goes to ordered, it'll send me a notification letting me know it's time to receive. But you can set up a more realistic lead time for generally for non-catalog items. Of course, sometimes we get things that are broken or aren't quite right, whatever the reason. You can reject the receipt. So if you were paying attention when I pointed out the accepted column, there was also a column for rejections. So I can say I received, say, 5, but I'm going to reject 2 because 2 came in broken. You can also say if you want a replacement item that should be shipped, or if a credit should be replied. Okay, so this way that purchasing or knows purchasing and AP know what to look for. A goods return tracking number can be captured. You can send a notification to the purchasing administrator group to let them know if they should talk to the supplier on your behalf, if AP should let AP know they should look for a credit. Say an order gets fully received because it was automatically received, but you're returning an item and you want to reverse that out, you would have to reopen the receipt first in order to do the rejection. Okay, so it can be reopened by someone in the purchasing group, so you could do the rejection. Now, say I went in and I put in the wrong information when I did the goods receipt. So maybe I accidentally put the quantity in rejected, but I meant to put it in accepted. Or maybe I mistyped. I typed that I hit 7 instead of 5 or 6. So I want to fix that. You can enter a negative value in the accepted box, which will basically reverse out that quantity. If you did it in rejected, you enter negative in rejected. So entering a negative amount will reverse out anything you've done before. If I'm making an adjustment to an item that's auto received, so for example, my office supplies get auto received. I received the box. I should have 10 boxes of pens, but I only got 8. I would reopen the receipt, adjust it, put in -2 in the accepted amount, and then submit. But once you reopen an auto receipt, it converts it to manual. So all additional receipts would have to be done manually. You can also have asset dated capture, so you can capture asset numbers or locations. You can do the receipt in the ERP and import it into Ariba, or you can, when you do the receipt in SAP Ariba, you export it to the ERP. So if it's coming from the ERP, the source of truth is the ERP. If it's going to the ERP, the source of truth is SAP Ariba. Hybrid receiving allows you to do desktop receiving for some commodities, central receiving or multi-stage receiving for others. Okay, so you can decide which commodities you would like to centrally receive, desktop receive. So you could say maybe office supplies are auto received, but if they're over $100, then it's manual desktop receipt. And then all IT equipment is centrally received and then approved by an approver after. And you might even say that we're going to central receive everything but office supplies. IT equipment gets an additional approver, but all other commodities don't need an additional approver. Okay, so multi-stage receiving is when it's entered by the central receiver and then approved by a requester internally. Okay, we talk about contracts tomorrow, right? So I'm just going to go into the system and show you a real quick demo of something else first before we get into contract receiving. Real quick, I just want to show you what it looks like when I reverse that receipt. So here I have here's the item that I partially received. Right? So I'll go in here and receive. Okay. And this quantity was fully received, but I actually didn't get it. I put a -1 in there. And then here I only got 7, so I could put a -3. And I submit. Okay. I'll go back home one more time. And we'll go back to that same receipt that's in receiving. Same requisition that's in receiving. And we'll look at the final receipt. So now we had to change. This receipt now shows that the previously accepted quantity was 7, 5, and this one was 0 because I made that change. Now maybe I go in and edit again because my side load letter tray needs to be rejected. Would you want to put any comments related to the changes? Comments are always optional. You can put a comment in on anything. It would be dependent on your business process, whether the comment should be put in if you're making a change or not. So now in this case, I realized that my side load letter tray mirror chrome is broken. Really not a surprise, mirrored chrome. So maybe it came in cracked, right? So I'll update my totals just to see the change, and I'll submit. And now here you can see I can send an email to purchasing. I can tell them it was broken, and I can click that I want a replacement or a credit. I hit next, brings me to the ends, and I submit. So when you do a rejection, there's an additional page for that additional information. Okay, so let's go back to contract invoicing, contract receiving. Now, we will talk about contracts tomorrow, and I will do the receipt on the contract tomorrow when we do the no release contract tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. We cover that. But I'll just go over it quickly today so you know. Basically, you can do a goods receipt on a contract when you're invoicing directly against the contract. You choose when creating the contract, if you want to do the receipt. It does the three-way match, contract, invoice, and receipt, just like a purchase order. Again, it's only for direct invoicing. So there's a receipt for any pricing terms, materials, pricing. But the milestone tracker gets a milestone verifier, and that person also acknowledges the milestone. So they would go in and they would say, yes, it was done. This will make more sense, but tomorrow. But milestones generally have prices associated with them in contracts that have invoices. So I just like to cover a little bit about receiving so you understand that contracts can be received, ones that are direct invoices, but since we'll be covering it tomorrow, we'll actually do the receipt tomorrow once we create a contract, and then it kind of clicks a little better. So we actually finished well short of the hour. So Pam, you're good there. Do you have any questions? The registration for the class tomorrow should be in the same place you found this one. So under events, you should see it listed for Friday. Yes, so tomorrow it's contracts compliance. So it is the contract in the procurement module. Okay, perfect. So it's actually pretty much the same link you used today. It's at 1 p.m. Eastern time. You don't need to register for it. And then the second one's at 3 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. I see someone else typing. Any other questions? Okay, so compliance means that you're making sure that you're complying with the contract. If you have an upstream contract workspace, yes, it would be linked to the workspace. And again, we talk about that tomorrow. Technically, we're not supposed to use upstream and downstream, but they're old world. They just switched over those terms and people are still using them. So yes, this is for, but this the class will hit the downstream side. Okay, so if you missed any sessions, playbacks are available. I still have to put up yesterday's sessions, but they'll be there shortly. Additional topics are often available on video, and we do the live sessions each month. Always check back to the events calendar, see what's there. And on the events calendar, you will also see where the live playbacks are. So you can look for that. Thank you again for attending.